Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Delaware River Festival. We're so excited that you're joining us today for one of our STEM career panels featuring environmental professionals working right here in the Philadelphia and Camden areas. My name is Chessa Ramachadi, and I will be moderating today's panel. I work at the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary, which is a nonprofit leading science-based and collaborative efforts to help improve the tidal Delaware River and Bay. I want to start out by thanking some of the other organizations that are involved in the planning of this year's festival, including the Center for Aquatic Sciences, the Philadelphia Water Department, the Independent Seaport Museum, Camden County Parks, and many other partners that have really helped pull this together. Today, we have a great program for you. We'll be hearing from 3 environmental professionals about their experience in this field. We're going to start out with each panelist giving a brief overview of their current position and their career path, and then we'll jump into a question and answer period. So however you're watching today, feel free to type your questions into the chat box, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, or our website. We'll see those questions come in and we will get to those later in the program. So without further ado, I am going to hand it off to Angela Meck.
Good morning, everyone. So I had the pleasure to be here today. Thank you, Chessa, for getting me involved with this. And I just wanted to tell you all a little bit about my career. Currently, I'm working for Tetra Tech part-time, and I am a civil engineer for them. I also do mining engineering work. I'm a professional engineer in mining engineering. And I am just going to take you through kind of the journey that took me to where I am now. I am from Schuylkill County, Schuylkill Haven, Pennsylvania. I went to high school at Blue Mountain High School, and then I went on to Penn State University. I went to the main campus, and I guess I always knew I wanted to do something with math. I wanted to be outside. I didn't want to be behind an office or in an office behind a desk all the time. So I started to pursue degrees in mining engineering and civil engineering. I wasn't sure which direction I wanted to go, but I chose mining engineering and civil engineering with a focus in environmental. Being from Schuylkill County, there's a lot of sites around here that have been damaged by mining historically. Historic mining practices are not the same as present day, but that doesn't make the situation any better. There's a lot to clean up around here and around other regions, not just in Pennsylvania, but the United States as a whole. So I went to school, did my degree, did a number of extracurricular activities, and have brought in my area of expertise a little bit and made myself a little bit more marketable by doing like archery. I did a lot of professional organizations that have maybe a student chapter, SME, SWE, Society of Women Engineers. Sorry about that. And then I went on, did a number of internships. I did some internships for some of the major coal companies. I did some work out in Wyoming, in Minnesota. Sorry. And then I went on and took a full-time job after college. I graduated with dual degrees, and I started work for BHP in New Mexico. I went to New Mexico, and you know what? I have to bring my son over here. Just a minute. He's a little noisy. I'll get to this in a minute. So I went to New Mexico, and I wanted to learn as much as I could about coal mining there, coal mining and the mining industry, so that I could really build up my background to better understand how we could clean up these sites that were historically mined. I went to New Mexico, worked there for 4 years. I did work with production. I did coal quality. I did dragline planning. I worked with a lot of really cool big equipment. It was a lot of fun. It was a really fun job. It was hard. It was definitely hard work, long hours. we did a lot of different types of work, mapping, safety initiatives, a lot of engineering, calculating. And to me, that was really fun. It was a really rewarding job. I ended up taking another role within BHP, and I moved to Arizona. And with that position, I was able to work more directly with site remediation. And I worked at some historic copper mining sites. And those sites were predating a lot of the environmental regulations that we have today. And so they had some situations that weren't so great, and a lot of water treatment, a lot of environmental hazards that needed to be remediated through years and years of mining practices, historical mining practices. So got a lot of experience there, learned some of the newer technologies as I was working with different consultants that came in, and took that education that I got at my job, which again was really rewarding. I enjoyed it. I made a lot of connections throughout the industry because although it is Arizona, I'm in Pennsylvania now. I worked in New Mexico initially. It's a small field of mining professionals, and then even smaller of a niche group within the environmental sector. So I really enjoyed working with those people, and I have some of those connections still today that I use just on help with my job now. And which brings me back to where I am today. I'm in Pennsylvania. I live where I grew up, and I had the opportunity to come back and buy or move into and purchase the family farm that my family lives on, or was born on. My grandfather's grandfather bought this a long time ago. When I made the decision to move home, my husband and I both wanted to bring ourselves back to this location. And we wanted to give some stability for our kids so that we weren't having to move around. And ultimately, my career goal was that I could get all this experience and come back to Pennsylvania and be able to help in this area that I really appreciate. I really have a lot of ties to this area, and I want to make an impact on it as much as I can. So it was really powerful to be able to come home with that knowledge. I work for Tetra Tech. They hired me on part-time, knowing that I would be working from home. That was back in 2019, so it was before COVID. So I guess I was fully prepared to work from home, and that was the decision that I had made. And thankfully, my employer made that possible. And like I said, it's part-time. I do a lot of projects that have to do with site remediation, water cleanup. I work with potential clients that have ideas for how they want to clean up areas or how they want to bring in some kind of an economic revenue that will help them offset the cost of remediation for some of these sites. And it's rewarding. It's nice to see the efforts going into these areas. I work with grant writing and seeing what government incentives are available to clean up certain locations and areas. And so I enjoy what I do, and I'm glad that this is the path that I've been on. You probably heard within that story, I didn't really always have the same drivers for the decisions that we made. I wanted to travel initially, and then we wanted to settle down, and then we wanted to have some stability, and now I'm in a situation where I can watch my kids, I can work from home, I can manage that. It's hard in its own way as well. That's just part of a career and part of career challenges and growth. So thank you. And I welcome any questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you so much, Angela, for that introduction. I'm now going to hand it over to Shawanda.
Hello, my name is Shawanda Spivey. I'm based in Philadelphia. I work in Philadelphia. I work for the Philadelphia Water Department, and I am currently stationed at Waterworks, but I am working from home. So my journey into this sector is, I guess, a story like everyone else's. So I am a Temple University graduate. Initially, when I went to college, I had aspirations of going to med school, becoming a doctor, and I decided that that was not for me. I was a biology major, and one of the challenges in studying biology for me is that I it became it became challenging to remain engaged because I wanted to be able to communicate to people how the things that I'm learning, how the things that I'm studying, how does this relate to your real life? Obviously, we know that in the times that we're living now with COVID and a lot of folks talking about like us having a public health discussion and us going through a pandemic. Obviously, biology affects us in our daily lives every day, all day, every day. However, a lot of times for folks that aren't scientists and people who don't study geology, sorry, that's my cat. He wanted to make a special appearance. Um, they don't a lot of times the general public doesn't this isn't just like a natural or a natural connection that people make. So I was always interested in ecology, marine ecology, marine biology, and so I decided to switch my major to environmental studies after taking a couple of ecology classes, and then but also after taking a tropical marine biology class tropical marine ecology class where my class went to Belize for a little bit went to Belize to study. That is what ignited what inspired me to change my major. What I enjoyed most about my field of study is that just by studying natural resources, land use, matters of air quality, water quality, these are things that these are our as humans our most basic needs. We need food, clothing, water, shelter. So again, matters of public health, virology, things like that. Though obviously those do have a large effect on our lives, but people can't, they don't make those connections because those things aren't necessarily tangible in the way that my water quality, my air quality, land use, those things that I can see that are moving, that are to some extent living and breathing and moving every day. Those are for a lot of people a higher priority. Going to Temple gave me the opportunity to develop a muscle that allows me to make very technical jargon palatable for the general public. I believe what makes COVID so challenging is that, again, that disconnect between the general public and science communication. For folks who have had access to formal education, people who have studied science, people who do have STEM degrees, a vaccine isn't something scary to us. A vaccine is something that, well, for most people, like you had to have some sort of vaccination in order to attend school as a child. But for most adults, that's they're very, very, like, psychologically removed from their childhood. However, for folks, again, involved in STEM career ways, we know that what a vaccine does is, it introduces it introduces a less potent form of the virus that your body develops antibodies to, thusly, giving you immunity. However, because again, that just like that disconnect in the way that science is communicated with the general public, there's a lot of conspiracy theories. There's a lot of just distrust in general, and so people are, just kind of uh, just having, just going as far as the conspiracy theories are concerned, people are pretty much just I don't know, it just seems like folks are writing fan fiction at this point. So one of my goals, or like, my primary objective, or what drives me, is to be able to make all of this information palatable, to be able to communicate to folks how climate change impacts your daily life, how watershed health or land use, how these things impact how these things impact your life, and how these things impact the quality of your life. Going back to my original story, so I graduated from Temple with a degree in environmental studies. One of my first jobs out of college, I was hired as a math and science teacher. And although I didn't becoming an educator wasn't a part of my career goals, or what I intended to do when I enrolled in college, but being able to engage young people, being able to just help nurture and develop the sense of environmental stewardship amongst young people, and then also to give young folks the ability to give young folks the ability to think critically and to question everything. Science isn't about beliefs, or it isn't about faith. I don't believe in the theory of relativity. I don't believe in the theories of thermodynamics. All of these science is about um, identifying evidence to support your conclusion, identifying evidence to back a statement. So again, being hired as a teacher is what led me along the path of an educator. So after I was hired, after I taught for a little bit, I was then hired by the Franklin Institute, and I worked in their what they call the museum program department, which might seem like a ridiculous name, but what museum programs was the sub department that created the shows, and the shows with the special effects, and the folks that staffed the activity carts. And what our job was, again, was communicating these lofty scientific concepts. What we would do, we gather together in a team. We would write scripts, and we would talk to various scientists. We would gather sources together. We would review each other's scripts, and what our mission was is we wanted to make science fun. We wanted to make science engaging, and we wanted people to walk away with more than what they came with. So after I worked for the Franklin Institute, I taught in adult ed. So I've helped folks who are I helped adults who were preparing for college, adults who were looking to get their high school diploma, people preparing for whatever professional test. So again, because I had taken so many upper level excuse me, math and science courses, there's a high demand for math and science teachers in almost every sector or like any level of education. So I did that for a while. I found my way to the water department after working in social services, and again, just providing academic support for folks, for non-traditional learners, and people who needed to prepare themselves to take themselves to the next level, either in their career or like just where they wanted to be academically. Long story, a little bit longer. I currently work for the water department. My title, I'm an environmental education planner. I support community outreach initiatives. I support community stewardship initiatives. I act as a liaison between the Cobbs Creek Community Environmental Center and the Water Department. I support a lot of their initiatives. This summer, they hosted a summer program for high school students where they were doing water quality analysis on the creek near the environmental center, the wetlands. They also did macrobiotic indexes, and that was awesome, being able to support that project, and again, just being able to facilitate this conversation with people, but especially young people, because young people are the next generation, and Gen Z hopefully will be able to lead us out of the mess that the previous generations have created. So that's my spiel.
Great. Thank you so much, Shawanda. We're going to get started with some questions now. So again, to our audience members, feel free to type those into the chat and we will get to those later. Being as this is our Delaware River Festival, I wanted to start out with just any ways that you think your current position or previous positions as well relate in some way to the Delaware River. We know that this is a really important water body in our area. So I'm curious in what ways your position or your job somehow is interconnected with the Delaware River.
I guess I'll go. Working for the water department, this is an easy one for me. Both the Delaware and the Schuylkill rivers are sources for drinking water. So we are very, 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 very much invested in maintaining the health of both of these rivers. But this is the Delaware River Festival. We're talking about the Delaware River. So in addition to us being invested in preserving and conserving the health of the Delaware River, the water department, we can't do this on our own. So that's where the education and the outreach component of the water department comes in. We want to instill a sense of ownership of the Delaware River, of the waterways in Philadelphia in general, but especially the Delaware River, because this is where our drinking water comes from. So we need you to help us in this mission. So if we, if we're polluting or we're not taking care of the Delaware River, where are we going to get our drinking water from?
So just building off of what Shawanda said, so I'm a little bit more upstream, and I'm in Schuylkill County, and the mining areas, the historical mining areas, are at the headwaters of the Schuylkill River. And so it's really important that we get a full understanding of the water quality and the water, how it needs to be treated and what contaminants might be in it before it gets down to the stage where you're pulling it for drinking water. So I'm very much involved with the water quality here and the Delaware River estuary and the drinking water that ultimately ends up in the city of Philadelphia. I think it's easy to maybe take advantage of the fact that the water comes out of the spigot and we drink it. And that's a great thing about most of our country. We can just drink the water wherever we are. But it's important to know that there's a lot that goes into it behind the scenes. And that's the work that Shawanda is doing right there directly with getting the water to you. And from the upstream perspective, I know it was a really eye-opening experience for me to realize how much is flowing into the rivers, how much is going downstream that impacts the water quality. So, and what needs to be removed, and how you know how to remove it. So there's a lot of science that goes into it, and it's really, really important to just keep up with those basic things that we're told, like don't litter, don't pollute the water. To keep up with those things, that helps along the line.
Great. Thank you both so much. We did have a question come in from our audience. What was the most important thing you got out of high school that has helped you now?
Well, the most important thing I got out of high school was the exposure to I had the opportunity to take as many science electives as I wanted. My high school was relatively small. I went to high school in Slidell, Louisiana. There were only 200 people in my graduating class, so so it was fairly easy for me to get the support that I needed, for the science classes that I took. My teachers lived in my neighborhood, and we were very much a tight-knit community. So, just having the support that I had, and being able to just have access to the courses that I needed to prepare me for college.
I have to agree with the courses in college. And I'm going to add a little bit from the previous question, because it does relate to my high school. Since I did grow up here, I think one of the biggest contributors to getting involved in the environment here was, one, enjoying being outside, growing up around here. Sorry. Being in the farming community also, and being so closely tied to conservation of the land. And that I did get involved with the Envirothon that we have here, which is a high school event. It starts actually in elementary school, and that's where I was involved with it the most, was in an elementary school actually. But it was an opportunity to get engaged, to learn a little bit more about the area around me. Aside from that, I did then start to get involved with the Schuylkill Headwaters Association, which is the nonprofits in the area that work, and they do events like the Schuylkill Sojourn. Had I known about that in high school, I definitely would have jumped on that and tried to learn more, and just have an outdoor adventure with other high school kids. That I would have loved that. So that opportunity is out there. But I really enjoyed my math classes, my science classes, and that definitely went back to having great teachers support me and other students in our school through teaching us the basics and then building on that to get us ready for college and other problems that we might face down the road, as far as like math challenges or environmental challenges. A lot of environmental challenges now, and trying to figure out chemistries and just pulling in a whole scope of things from an education.
Yeah, that's great. I'm curious what other advice you have for students who are looking to pursue the environmental field, or if there are any opportunities either with your organization or other organizations that you're aware of how they can get involved to sort of test out what the environmental field is like right now while they're in high school.
So in for folks that are based in Philadelphia, if you're in high school, there are several different STEM programs that are like actively looking for young folks to participate. So there's WINS. Well, WINS is for the acronym stands for Women in Natural Sciences. That's for young women and young ladies. I believe that that program is housed at the Academy of Natural Sciences. There's another program in West Philly. I believe it's called the West Philly Youth Environmental Justice project, and that's the group of young folks that I worked with this summer at the Cobbs Creek Environmental Center. Oh God, I just lost it. There's the Land Health Institute. The Land Health Institute, they have an organization. I think they're called oh my God. I think they're called the Watershed Stewards, I believe. But the Land Health organization, the Land Health Institute, has a youth program where I believe that there's a stipend. I'm not sure how often the participants get paid, but pretty much they conduct water quality testing. They do some stewardship projects. A couple years ago, they did a lot of work at the Cobbs Creek Environmental Center. Also, I believe the aquarium or the Center for Aquatic Sciences has youth programs and internships as well. So you should definitely reach out to them if you're interested. And then also you can for folks based in Philadelphia, if you visit the Philadelphia Youth Network's website and to look for STEM programming, I'm fairly sure that you can find options and find what you're looking for.
So I can say maybe one of my suggestion, my recommendation would be to get involved with organizations that might be in your area. If you're outside of Philadelphia, we have the Schuylkill Headwaters Association here, Schuylkill Conservation District. They usually take interns for the summers. The other options that might be available, there are organizations that I work with on water cleanup or site remediation here. EPCAMR, Eastern Pennsylvania Coalition, Abandoned Mine Reclamation. And so they do projects, and not just projects that you can go and they do projects like tree planting. They do events that you can get out and you can meet people that are also trying to clean up the areas, or just get out and learn what projects are going on in the area. They're always welcoming people to come into meetings, or as we're still in the face of virtual meetings, even a virtual meeting is helpful to kind of introduce different topics or different projects to you, see what's happening in your neighborhood or maybe a couple towns over. And the virtual aspect of things actually adds a little twist to it, because you might not have to go somewhere. If you don't have a way to get somewhere, you can still learn virtually. And so I can say I've done a couple virtual seminars in Arizona because that was something that I was passionate about when I lived in Arizona, and the Women in Arizona group hosts virtual webinars, and I was able to learn from topics out in Arizona that I was able to maybe bring forth to Pennsylvania for similar situations. I know for me, I didn't actually do many outreach programs in high school. I worked at a local convenience store and gas station and made subs. And I actually got to meet a lot of people that I work with today through making their lunch. And there's something wrong with getting a job and getting out there too. But specifically, there are a lot of organizations that are trying to get people involved. They're also trying to give out scholarships. I'm very active with the Society of Mining, Society of Mining Exploration, and they are based out of all of Eastern Pennsylvania, or they're a national organization, but they're based the chapter I'm in is based in Eastern Pennsylvania. We give scholarships out every year, and sometimes we don't get applicants. So it's really great to get involved in these organizations because that'll help you not only in meeting people who might give you advice on their careers or tell you about their careers, and you could find out what it is that you want to do or don't want to do, and then potentially get some financial aid in pursuing those career goals that you might have. So.
Yeah, those are both some really great opportunities. And we've put some more information on some of the resources that Shawana mentioned in the chat, so you can check those out there. I am curious from both of you if there's any hobbies or skills or interests that you had that have come into play in your career that you might not have expected that they would actually help you in your career, whether it's, just something that you enjoyed doing outside of work or some other, random thing that you get to do in your job. What's something that might be unexpected that's come into play in your current position?
So I would say for me that was when I went to college. When I got out of high school, went to college, I wanted to get involved with hunting. I thought that was a really neat thing, hunting for my food and learning the whole process there. And I got involved with the archery team, archery club, and then I ended up getting all borrowed equipment from them. I didn't have the money to get a bow or anything like that, so everyone gave me parts and pieces. I put it together, and I ended up learning how to shoot archery, and I ended up being pretty good at it. And they said, we want you to do some competitions. And I got more and more involved in the archery club, and they ended up moving me into president. And so they elected me president of the archery club at Penn State. And we were a competition team for Penn State University. So we were a national organization or a national level of competition. And so I was able to travel a lot with the archery team. Now that was mostly funded by our own out of pocket. So we did things on a pretty low budget. But when we were at these competitions, we were Penn State archery team. It was really cool. I got to meet a lot of people. And as president, I ended up taking on a lot of responsibility that I didn't expect to get from something that I just wanted to do to try out hunting. I never even had time to go hunting, and it wasn't even a thing that I did. So I did a competition team for Penn State. And when I interviewed for my first internship, I thought, what am I going to talk about? I haven't done any work. What are these employers going to be looking for from me? And so I took recommendations from the Society of Women Engineers, wrote my resume, and I put all the things I was involved with. One of them was archery, and it was a pretty big part of my life. And I was doing a lot of work. They ended up talking to me about it in my interview. And they were telling me, what do you do? And I described what I did regularly. And they said, do you really do all that? And I thought, well, yeah, I wouldn't make something up. But the conversation led to them really asking me pointed questions about what I was doing, because they wanted to know what I was capable of doing. And it wasn't anything related to mining at all. It wasn't anything related to surveying, which was a lot of what I did that summer. They wanted to see what kind of leadership skills I had, what kind of responsibility I had. And all of that was demonstrated through this completely separate from mining, but very important part of just archery and the archery club. And then that led to me getting my first internship because they saw that the skill set that I demonstrated through archery and my involvement with that organization. And if I hadn't gotten that internship, I don't know that I would have gotten the other internship. And so my path there would have been completely different without getting the experience that I had gotten. So it was really neat because who would have thought it's not mining at all, or civil or water or anything, but it helped.
This is a tough one. So one of my hobbies is, well, I love music. I'm a DJ, and was kind of more than a hobby now because, like, I moonlight as a DJ. But being a DJ is these days requires you to wear many hats. You are some people act as their own manager. You are you have to act as a promoter, like, you're promoting your own events. Like, you have to find someone to design your flyers if you don't, have that skill set. And so being able to, learning, like, throughout the time that I've been DJing, how to manage all of those things and how to curate events those are skills, soft skills, skills nonetheless, that are definitely necessary for the role that I play at the water department. There's a lot of events. There's a lot of coordination between various vendors. There's the design of a flyer. There's the actual promotion, the actual outreach. And I had no idea that something that just started as a hobby that became a source of income, that these skills and what I've learned would that they would transfer to, like, the professional realm for me. But also what DJing is, or what for me, playing music is finding that identifying that thing or that sound, or those or a series of songs or sounds that unites various people from different walks of life. Excuse me, different walks of life, different backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, things like that. But what brings all of these people together? And again, my role, supporting community outreach, you have various stakeholders, people with different agendas, people with different perspectives, people who come from, just various backgrounds, culturally, religiously, just almost any thing that in any type of capacity in which people can be different, people are different. But just, again, being able to identify what those folks are most invested in, what do they prioritize the most, and being able to bring folks together around the quality of their water, the quality of the aesthetic of their neighborhood, and again, just like being able to galvanize people of just various backgrounds, various belief systems around what is the most important in getting people to buy into that mission and to carry out that mission. So I never thought that just being able to throw a party, the skills that I never saw that, or being able to promote an event. I didn't see that or anticipate that would transfer to the professional realm of my life, but it did.
Yeah, those are both really great answers. I think it really goes to show, whatever you are interested in doing, you sort of go after what you are passionate about, and, you will find skills that are transferable to other parts of your life. We had another question come in from our audience. So I'm going to ask, what is the coolest thing you get to do in your job?
So, the coolest thing that I get to do in my job is, so I don't work for the lab, where all of the official water analysis is done and where all the data is collected. But however, this summer, just being able to lead young people through just basic water chemistry analysis was one of the most rewarding things that I've done so far in my career. Just any opportunity in which I can in just have like not one-on-one conversation, but just like face-to-face conversations with people, and just dispel a lot of urban myths and things like that is what I live for. But this summer was pretty cool. Just being able to do field research with the young folks at the Cobbs Creek Environmental Center.
So I really enjoy engaging with others as well. Obviously, I wouldn't have signed up for this. Gosh, sorry. I think one of the coolest things that I get to do is like go outside and go for a hike, and that's part of my job. You do these wetland surveys, or you do a site tour. I get to put my hiking boots on and go outside. I can throw on like t-shirt or whatever. Throw him in a backpack. But I think the coolest and rewarding part is getting to see these projects before and after, especially the land reuse. Seeing something that has just gone to waste, like an entire hillside or a river waterway that has been really impacted. You can see the orange from some of the contaminants that are common in mining, abandoned mine drainage. That's something that can get cleaned up. And when it's cleaned up and you see the clear water running through and you can see the stream bed, you can see the fish in it, you can do those fish surveys, the macroinvertebrates, you can see those numbers that this has been restored. This area has been cleaned up, and it's a really cool and really rewarding thing. So that's always my goal, and that's something that drives me.
Yeah, that's great. I am curious, the environmental field is always evolving and always changing. And I think for, our audience, these folks are maybe in high school right now. So I'm curious what you all think, being in the environmental field right now, how this career field may change in the future, and what those careers that our high schoolers will have, in the coming years, how they may look a little different, or what any insight into what you think the outlook of this field may look like in the future.
I think that so one of I guess the um emerging fields within the environmental sector would be just any type of spatial analysis, GIS, any type of modeling, remote sensing. I would, if you have an interest in this sector, or maybe you're just a techie. GIS is an emerging field. And then also just the need to be able to visually illustrate or express impact via maps is something that a lot of organizations across various sectors are going to need. I would highly encourage folks to just explore GIS. When you go to college, just take a intro to GIS class, intro to GIS course. Also, GIS courses are offered at community colleges. I think that, again, anything where you are any sector in which you are providing a service is a sector where you're going to find the money. Creating tangibles and and deliverables is where the money resides.
Yeah, I think that my experience so far has been we're going more technical, more automatic. I'm glad Shawanda said about the GIS because that was something that was a huge piece of what I was doing in Arizona and the remediation there, site remediation, and we were moving to using automatic drones, autonomous drones that did a scheduled flyover and collected the data that we needed, whether it be LiDAR data, which feeds into a GIS system, gives you 3 dimensions, or if it was security, or if it was movement on a tailings dam. There were a lot of different uses for that, and that's something that's definitely going to take off here more than what it already has. The different technologies are so hard to keep up with. I feel like as a professional, but once you find something that's really interesting, it's easy to follow it. The GIS is something I see in every single part of my job. Presenting maps and just presenting in general. Some of the concepts that I do are very hard to talk about, and like I stumble over them too. If you have a picture, if you have something that you can present on it to make it more tangible for someone else to understand that might not be working with it every day, that's so important. I use Google Earth Pro a lot, and that seems pretty basic. That's online, you can use it now, but I use that all the time because I can do something quick, easy, and get a point across. Other things that I would say would be really helpful with Excel. There's so many capabilities with Excel, and if you end up going into a science-based math calculations, it's so critical to understand Excel. There's so many tricks. You can be a pro with some extra knowledge that you might gain from courses that you take. And then lastly, and the most important course that I ever took in college or anywhere was actually a technical speech course. Being able to do public speaking and being able to talk in front of people and explain yourself was not something that came naturally to me. I was one of those kids that would make myself sick at the thought of talking in front of people. And so if that's where you're at right now in high school, I feel that, I understand. And that's okay. You can move from that. You can present to an audience you can't even see miles away with a screaming child in your lap. There are, I think that building on speech and presentation skills and keeping up with how things are being presented, whether it be webinars, that would be a great thing to explore.
Great, thank you. It looks like we are just about out of time for today. I do want to leave some space in case our panelists have any last words to leave our students on before we wrap up.
I would suggest to all of the young folks tuning in to ask as many questions as possible. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask your teachers. If your teachers don't know, ask your guidance counselors. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Sometimes I find myself just being very overwhelmed by the fact that, I don't know something or how much I feel that I don't know. But what helps guide me through that feeling is that just knowing that there are, whatever I don't know, somebody or somebody's knows what I don't know. And those people are more than willing to share what they know with me. So I would, and if I could go back and do undergrad again, I would definitely. I would definitely do a better job of advocating for myself and asking questions. I would also recommend that you get as much hands-on experience as possible. I'm a practical learner, and it doesn't things don't make sense to me unless I can see them, touch them, and feel them. Apply for as many internships as possible. It's very important to not have an ivory approach. An ivory tower approach to life and to whatever it is you decide to study. Go out and get some real, practical, get some field experience. Find a mentor. As an undergrad, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't find mentors until I had joined the workforce. Finding a mentor and just having somebody that you can bounce ideas off, having someone that you can talk to about your goals, your short-term goals, your long-term goals, where you see yourself in your career next year, where you see yourself in your career in 5 years. Having a mentor is incredibly excuse me, incredibly important, incredibly beneficial. Again, just taking advantage of the knowledge that people have. I felt like I spent a lot of time, trying to figure out things on my own instead of just asking people who already knew. I remember that in college, well, also now in high school, your teachers, your guidance counselors, later on, your professors, to some extent, they work for you. You're not their boss, you're not their supervisor, but to some extent, they work for you. Meaning that if you're again looking for these practical experiences, or looking to get more training or more experience in the field. Again, these are folks that are your teachers, your professors are very knowledgeable and have gone through what you've already gone through, and are more than willing to help guide you through the process. So again, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Never stop asking questions. Remember that your journey, your career, your goals, the things that you want to do, prioritize those. And, whenever you encounter a closed door, go to another door. There's an open door somewhere.
Thank you so much. That's really great advice, Shawanda. Angela, any last thoughts for our panelists or for our students before we close out? And it's okay if it's no.
I have to agree. Get involved, and when you start something new, you might not know how to do it, and it's okay, and that's part of the process. And there are opportunities that I get still today, and I tell someone I don't really know that much about this, and they say, "Well, you know what it is," and that's the first step. So that's going into it like you're going to be a lifelong learner is a great approach.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to thank you, Angela and Shawanda, so much for your insight and your advice today. I think it was really good information for our students. I also want to thank all of you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed our program today. I would invite you to check out some of the other things happening as part of the Delaware River Festival this year. We have virtual programs happening this week, recordings from virtual programs that have already happened this week up on our Facebook and YouTube and website. And you can also check out some in-person events this weekend at DelawareRiverFest.org. So thanks again.